There are certain ideas that, once genuinely understood, cannot be unseen. You go looking at your own life differently after encountering them, the way you notice a word constantly once you've just learned its meaning for the first time. The Stoics built an entire philosophical system out of exactly 10 such ideas, refined over centuries by an emperor, a former slave, and a wealthy statesman who each faced circumstances that would have broken most people and who each concluded, independently arriving at the same core truths, that these 10 laws were the actual architecture beneath a life lived well. We are going to walk through all 10 of these laws in the order that builds most naturally on everything before it, so that by the end of this video you have not just 10 interesting quotes, but a complete working framework the Stoics themselves used to face war, betrayal, slavery, and the collapse of everything they thought they could rely on. Stay with me until the end, because the 10th law is the one that Marcus Aurelius considered the actual reason all the other 9 mattered at all. The channel where ancient philosophy meets the battles of modern life. If you're new here, welcome. You've arrived at exactly the right moment. And if you've been here before, you already know what we do. We go into the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the letters of Seneca, and the discourses of Epictetus, and we pull out what has survived 2,000 years because it actually works. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe now, because this video brings together everything this channel has built toward. Law 1. The Law of Control. Epictetus opened his entire philosophical system with this law, because every other law on this list depends on getting it right. Some things are within our power, our judgments, our choices, our effort, our character. Some things are not outcomes, other people's opinions, the past, and most of the future. That's why this law changes everything once genuinely internalized. Almost all human suffering, examined honestly, traces back to a single mistake. Believing something outside this narrow circle of genuine control is actually inside it, and then suffering when reality inevitably fails to comply with that mistaken belief. You cannot control whether someone likes you, whether a decision turns out well, or what tomorrow holds. You can control your effort, your integrity, and how you respond to whatever arrives. The moment you stop spending your finite mental energy on the first category and redirect it entirely toward the second, an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering simply stops occurring, not because circumstances improved, but because your relationship to them corrected itself at the root. How differently 2 people experience the exact same job application. One person submits their application, having genuinely done everything within their control, researching, preparing, presenting themselves honestly and well, and then spends the following 2 weeks checking their inbox obsessively, rehearsing imagined outcomes, and feeling their mood rise and fall with every passing hour of silence. The other person submits the same quality of application, recognizes that the actual decision now belongs entirely to people and circumstances outside their control, and returns their attention to the next thing genuinely within their power. Neither person can change the outcome through worry. Only one of them pays the emotional cost of pretending otherwise. Law 2. The Law of Perception. Wrote something that sounds almost too simple to be as radical as it actually is. Men are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things. The event itself, an insult, a setback, a loss, is neutral. What actually produces your suffering is the interpretation you construct around that event, often within a fraction of a second, so quickly that the interpretation and the event feel indistinguishable. This law matters because it locates the actual site of your suffering somewhere you can genuinely reach. You cannot always change what happens to you. You can, with practice, examine and in many cases revise the story you're telling yourself about what happened. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly, pausing to ask whether an impression was actually true or merely how something appeared in a heated moment. The same event, reframed honestly, very often loses most of the power it seemed to hold a moment earlier. Law 3. The law of impermanence. Stoics practiced memento mori, the remembrance of death, not as morbid fixation, but as a clarifying discipline that strips away trivial concerns and reveals what genuinely matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the brevity of any single human life set against the vastness of time, using this perspective specifically to correct the distorted sense of permanence that causes people to postpone what matters and obsess over what doesn't. This law changes your life the moment you actually let it operate on your daily decisions rather than treating it as an abstract, occasional thought. The argument you're having, the grudge you're holding, the meaningful conversation you keep delaying, measured against the actual, finite scale of a human life. Priorities reorganize themselves with remarkable clarity. This is not about living in constant awareness of death in a way that produces anxiety. It is about using the fact of impermanence as a tool that consistently redirects your attention toward what will actually matter when you look back, rather than what merely feels urgent today. The specific way this law tends to operate in practice, and it's worth naming directly. Most people, when asked directly whether their life is finite, will agree instantly and without hesitation. It is not, in the abstract, a controversial claim. And yet, very few people actually organize their daily choices as though this were true, postponing important conversations, meaningful pursuits, and genuine reconciliation indefinitely, as though an unlimited supply of future days were guaranteed. The Stoic practice of memento mori exists precisely to close this gap between what you already believe intellectually and how you actually behave, by returning your attention, deliberately and regularly, to the fact of your own mortality until it actually starts shaping the choices you make today, rather than remaining a fact you agree with but never actually act on. Law 4. The law of reaction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Between any provocation and your response to it, there exists a gap, however small, in which you retain the ability to choose rather than simply react. The Stoics called the discipline of noticing and widening this gap prosos. Watchfulness, the deliberate practice of examining an impression before granting it your full emotional assent. Or changes your life because it restores something most people don't realize they've surrendered, the actual authorship of their own responses. Without this discipline, every provocation, every insult, every frustration effectively controls you by remote, producing whatever reaction it was designed or accidentally positioned to produce. With this discipline genuinely practiced, that gap widens, sometimes to just a second or two, sometimes to considerably more, and in that space you get to decide, rather than simply discovering what you did after the fact. Law 5. The law of virtue over outcome. It's taught that virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance is the only true good, and that external outcomes, however desirable, are what they called preferred indifference, worth pursuing but never worth sacrificing your character to obtain. Seneca wrote extensively about the difference between a good outcome and a good decision, noting that these two things, while often aligned, are not actually the same thing, and that a person's peace of mind should rest on the second rather than the first. It changes your life because it separates your sense of self-worth from the unpredictable, often uncontrollable arena of results. You can make an excellent decision, apply full effort and integrity, and still watch the outcome fail to materialize the way you hoped for reasons entirely outside your control. Under this law, that outcome does not diminish the actual value of the decision or the character behind it. This distinction alone removes an enormous amount of anxiety from ambitious pursuit, because it stops making your worth hostage to variables you were never actually able to guarantee in the first place. This law is worth applying honestly to a specific memory from your own life. A time you made a genuinely good, well-considered decision that nonetheless produced a disappointing result through no real fault of your own. Notice how differently that memory feels once you separate the quality of the decision from the outcome it happened to produce. Most people, without this law, quietly punish themselves for outcomes that were never actually a verdict on their judgment or character at all, simply because the result and the decision arrived so close together in time that they became fused in memory, as though one necessarily proved something about the other. Law 6. The Law of Silence. Wrote to his friend Lucilius about the discipline of retiring into yourself, of becoming selective and deliberate about when your words actually enter the world, rather than reacting to every provocation with an immediate, unexamined response. The Stoics considered restraint in speech a genuine measure of character, precisely because speaking is the easy, automatic impulse, and silence, chosen deliberately, requires actual discipline. This law changes your life in ways that compound quietly over years. Every argument you decline to enter that wasn't worth entering, every insult you allow to pass without a matching reply, every moment you choose to listen fully rather than interrupt with your own response. Each one preserves energy, protects relationships, and maintains a form of composure that becomes, over time, one of the most quietly powerful qualities a person can carry. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded constantly by people trying to provoke a reaction from him, demonstrated this law repeatedly throughout his reign, understanding that unnecessary words once spoken cannot be retrieved, while a well-placed silence almost always can be broken later if genuinely needed. Law 7. The Law of the Present Moment. Wrote about confining your attention to the task directly in front of you, noting that most anxiety comes from a mind divided between regret over the past and anxiety about a future that has not yet arrived and may never unfold the way you're imagining. He argued that the present moment is the only place life is actually lived, and that a mind fully engaged with what is actually happening right now carries a stability that a mind scattered across imagined pasts and futures simply cannot access. Or changes your life because it addresses a specific, common form of suffering that has nothing to do with your actual circumstances at all. The suffering produced entirely by mentally rehearsing problems that either already happened and cannot be changed, or that have not happened yet and may never occur in the form you're imagining. Returning your attention deliberately and repeatedly to the actual present task in front of you is not a minor relaxation technique. The Stoics considered it a genuine philosophical discipline central to living well rather than merely surviving anxiously. Law 8. The Law of the Obstacle. Aurelius wrote one of the most quietly radical lines in the entire Stoic tradition. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This law inverts the ordinary relationship most people have with difficulty, treating the obstacle not as something separate from your goal, blocking your path toward it, but as the actual material your progress is made from. This law changes your life because it removes the exhausting, constant negotiation between the difficulty you're facing and the future reward you're hoping it will eventually produce. Instead of waiting for the obstacle to end so the real progress can begin, this law asks you to recognize that engaging directly with the obstacle, whatever it happens to be, is itself the progress, not a delay standing between you and it. The Stoics practiced this discipline specifically because they faced obstacles, political betrayal, physical hardship, the collapse of plans, far more severe than most modern inconveniences, and found that this reframing, rather than mere endurance, produced genuine resilience rather than simply gritted teeth survival. This law is easiest to test against a specific current difficulty in your own life rather than as an abstract idea. Whatever obstacle you're facing right now, a difficult relationship, a professional setback, a physical limitation, try mentally reframing it. just once, not as something standing between you and the life you actually want, but as the literal substance of the character you're currently building. The obstacle does not become pleasant through this reframing. What changes is your relationship to the discomfort itself, from a battle against something delaying your real life to genuine engagement with the actual material your real life happens to be made of, right now, today. Law 9. The law of repeated practice. Seneca compared the cultivation of virtuous character to physical training, noting that no athlete becomes strong through a single, however intense, effort. Strength, whether physical or characterological, is the residue of thousands of small, individually unremarkable repetitions, accumulating over time into something the person eventually simply is, without needing to consciously will it into existence each day. Or changes your life because it corrects one of the most common misunderstandings about personal transformation, the belief that a single sufficiently motivated decision should be enough to produce lasting change. The Stoics knew this was false 2,000 years before modern psychology confirmed it experimentally. Character is built through ascesis, deliberate repeated training, not through the intensity of any single moment of resolve. This law asks you to stop measuring your progress by how motivated you feel on any given day and start measuring it by what you actually repeatedly choose, regardless of how you felt while choosing it. Law 10. The law of contribution. At the final law, the one Marcus Aurelius considered the actual reason the other 9 mattered at all. The Stoics held a concept called cosmopolitanism, the idea that every human being is fundamentally a citizen, not merely of their own city or nation, but of the entire rational cosmos, bound together by a shared capacity for reason, and therefore a shared responsibility toward one another's well-being. Marcus Aurelius returned constantly throughout his private writings to a single anchoring question that gave every other discipline on this list its actual direction. What is the most important thing I can do today in service of the greater good? Without this final law, the previous 9 risk becoming simply an impressive collection of personal disciplines practiced for their own sake, disconnected from any larger meaning. With it, controlling what's yours to control, examining your perceptions honestly, remembering impermanence, widening the gap before reacting, valuing virtue over outcome, practicing selective silence, staying present, embracing obstacles, and repeating good choices consistently, all of it becomes part of a coherent life pointed towards something beyond simply personal comfort or self-improvement in isolation. That transforms 9 excellent personal habits into an actual philosophy of how to live well among other people, which is, in the end, what the Stoics were always actually building toward. Let's step back and look at what we've actually built today. 10 laws: control, perception, impermanence, reaction, virtue over outcome, silence, the present moment, the obstacle, repeated practice, and contribution, that together form the complete architecture the Stoics used to face circumstances far more difficult than most of us will ever encounter, and to face them not merely with survival but with genuine, settled strength. Laws work in isolation the way they might appear to on this list. They reinforce each other constantly. The law of control makes the law of reaction possible, because you cannot widen the gap before responding until you've genuinely accepted what is and isn't yours to direct. The law of perception makes the law of the obstacle possible, because reframing a difficulty as material for growth requires first examining and revising the story you're telling yourself about what that difficulty means. And every single one of the first 9 laws finds its actual purpose only once connected to the 10th. Because personal discipline practiced with no larger direction eventually becomes simply an elaborate routine pointed at nothing in particular. It's worth being honest about something before we close. Understanding all 10 of these laws intellectually, which you now genuinely do, is not the same thing as living by them. And the gap between those two things is exactly where most people who encounter Stoic philosophy for the first time eventually lose momentum. The Stoics themselves were remarkably clear about this. Marcus Aurelius did not write his private reflections because he had already mastered these 10 laws and simply wanted to record the achievement. He wrote them because he was still practicing every single day, often failing, often falling short of his own standard, and using the daily discipline of writing to recommit himself to laws he had already understood intellectually for decades. This is not a discouraging observation. It simply means that understanding, which you now have, is the beginning of this practice, not its conclusion. Here is your challenge for tonight. Not 10 challenges, just one. Look honestly at these 10 laws and identify the single one where the gap between how you currently live and how these laws describe living is widest. Not the easiest one to adopt, the one that would actually change the most if you took it seriously starting tomorrow. Spend real time tonight considering what practicing that one law would actually look like in an ordinary, easily forgotten day, because that is where every one of these 10 laws was actually built and tested by the people who first articulated them. Aurelius did not become the philosopher we still study 2,000 years later through a single dramatic insight. He became that person through the accumulated weight of thousands of ordinary days, examining these same 10 laws against his own conduct in the private pages of a journal he never intended anyone else to read. That same practice, built one honestly examined day at a time, is available to you starting today. If this video gave you something, a shift, a reframe, a moment of genuine recognition, hit the like button. It costs nothing, and it tells us this kind of depth is exactly what you want more of. Leave a comment and tell me honestly, which of these 10 laws do you think will change the most for you once you actually start living it rather than simply understanding it? I read every comment on this channel, and I'll be down there with you. Subscribe to Wisdom of the Stoics if you haven't already. We go this deep every single week into philosophy that has survived 2,000 years because it was built for exactly the hardest, most ordinary moments of a real life. Until next time, stay grounded, stay disciplined, and remember what Marcus Aurelius told himself on the mornings the world felt heaviest. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength.